Hey, how's it going? Mike from LI Flies Mike, and as always, the full list of materials will be down in the description below. Today we're going to be tying with a Mustad tarpon hook in a size 2/0 and using some monofilament thread. Now we're going to be using EP fiber and tying a classic modern fly, if you will, the EP Baitfish, because when I was growing up as a young kid, this was kind of like the hot new material and fly on the block. So this is kind of the material that helped me hone my skills with synthetic material and really learn about V-tying and all that. So it's a good material to work with. What we're going to do is we're going to take a pinch of EP fiber here and we're going to do a 60-40 tie. We're going to be using white for our tail section, and we're going to tie 40% of the material off the back and fold back the other 60 right on top, and then just tie on top of the material. This will give us a nice little start transition to the tail. And this whole fly is about tapering the material by adjusting the lengths of the material so you can reduce the amount of trimming you need to do. Now, as with any baitfish fly, I like adding a little bit of flash, and we're going to be incorporating some silver angel hair into the tail section. We'll be using silver for the belly section, or the white EP section, and we'll be using some tan for the top, because that's going to be the color that we go with for the top section. As with any good saltwater fly, it needs to be durable, so we're going to go ahead and take some super glue here, apply this to our threads, and just take the paper packaging from any fly tying packaging and just kind of spread that super glue around. Make sure that it pretty much dries instantly so you don't need to worry about it when you're tying. So now the rest of this fly is pretty much all V-ties. And just by adjusting the length of the material, we're going to adjust the length down here to about 2/3 of the length of our last tie. And we're pretty much just going to tie the material directly in the middle. So you'll see you start with the white for the belly, and then use some tan on top, trying to use equal amounts top and bottom. And it's very important to use a sparse amount of material. Using too much material can cause the fly, just A, it's a waste of material once you end up trimming it, and B, the fly might not track properly. By keeping it sparse, we're going to ensure that we don't waste too much material and the fly is going to swim properly. For the V-tie, we have it tied in the middle, offset, and then we just fold it back on that opposite side. We've covered V-tying a lot here on this channel, so there's tons of different videos going more in depth about it if you'd like to see. So now for the next ties, we're going to really start drastically reducing the length of the material. Adjusting the length, we can get a natural taper and reduce the amount of trimming that we need to do. So for this next tie here, we're going to probably go about half the length of the initial tie that we did. And remember that we're tying this in the middle and folding it back, so you need to think about what the length of the material is once it's folded back in a V-tie shape. You can always just take the material and kind of pinch it and fold it in a V and then hold it up to the fly. It's one way of kind of visualizing it and just an easy way of kind of guessing it. The other way is, once you have it tied down directly in the middle, you can kind of pull it back and forth and get it lined up, and then you can fold it back if you like. And about every other tie or so, I'll take some angel hair, so you can see we got some tan angel hair, wind and flash. I have a lot of people ask, the materials are very similar to me. I use them pretty much in the same way, so it doesn't make too much of a difference, in my opinion. And I'm going to use some silver for the belly here, continuing that trend of using this silver for the white EP fiber. And by tying that angel hair in, or that wind and flash in, before we fold our V-tie back, it'll all blend together very nicely once we go ahead and brush the fly out before trimming it. So now, once we start moving forward, again, keeping our ties short, you're going to see as we move forward, the ties are going to get shorter and shorter. At some point, it does get a little hard to start working with V-ties when they're too short. So there's obviously like a realistic amount that you can shorten them to, but the whole idea is you don't want the material protruding past the hook point in any way. And again, emphasizing on the sparseness of the ties, try not to use too much material. It really adds up quickly. You can see the EP fiber. You don't need a lot of it for the fly to like essentially fully block out any sort of transparency. I like having my flies be somewhat transparent. It's the benefit of having natural materials. But so just keep that in mind, is like try not to have too much material on there, because it's very easy to start adding too much material to a fly like this. So moving forward here, even shorter ties. Again, just reducing the amount of material that we're going to be trimming, and by keeping the ties shorter, you just have less material overall. It's kind of harder to end up having a fly that will track improperly. You can see the V-ties are very simple. Just tie again in the middle, have it offset. The whole idea is by having it offset, and when you fold it back and tie on top, you're building a 3D profile. By having that white on the belly splayed on either side and that tan on top, we're building not only a profile top and bottom, but we're also building somewhat of a 3D profile. And depending on where you position the material and how much material to tie and where you tie it down, you can adjust whether you want more of a vertical profile, more of a horizontal 3D profile. It's really up to you. Now we're going to be tying this fly for a friend of mine who's going down to the Caribbean and possibly tarpon fishing. So I do want to add a weed guard. So we only have really room for another tie or two here. So we'll go ahead and, again, nice short material here so we don't waste any, and add a little bit of angel hair in here to our second to last tie. Angel hair looks a little unruly, but once we brush the fly out, it's always ideal to brush a fly like this with a fine wire brush or a comb. It really blends together because the angel hair is so subtle and soft. So a nice little touch you can do is just take a red Sharpie, and the white EP fiber really takes the Sharpie well. So just taking this red Sharpie and hitting, I guess, the base of the EP fiber and the threads, we're trying to simulate the gills on a baitfish. And now we can go ahead and move forward and just tie our last EP fiber collar in here, our V-tie, and that red area that we covered with the Sharpie will be covered with the somewhat transparent white EP fiber, so we'll end up with a pretty natural looking gill area without it looking too much like we just drew it on there. So this will be our last tie here, because again, I do want to tie a weed guard in front of this, because this fly is a fantastic snook and redfish and tarpon fly, so you can really fish this for all sorts of species by just adjusting the shape of the fly and the colors and whatnot. So this will be our last tie here. We're going to fold this back in our V-ties and add some little angel hair and whatnot like we've been doing. And you can see how that white EP fiber over the gills, it kind of blends in nicely and isn't too obvious. You want it to be somewhat subtle. So for the weed guard, we're just going to be using some 40-pound stiff mono. And this is some stuff that I got at a local tackle shop that was used for like offshore leader materials or any sort of pre-made leaders or whatnot. And it's just very stiff. Mason's hard mono, I think, is something you can use as well. I used to use in the past. And I'm just going to fold this in half because we want 2 pieces of mono sticking down. And this is going to prevent the fly from getting stuck on branches or underwater obstructions. By taking the mono, I just have like a very flat inner edge on this pliers. I'm going to clamp down and flatten this mono, and once it's nice and flat and together, the 2 pieces, I can bend it in a 90-degree angle. What this is going to do is this is going to create like a little L shape. This will give me like a little shelf to actually start tying the mono on and get a nice good grip. And it just makes it so much easier to work with than just trying to tie it on the mono and then bend it physically when it's on the fly. You'll find the mono just slips out. And something to prevent the mono from slipping out over time in general is taking the thread and weaving it like a dumbbell eyes, like you would with dumbbell eyes figure 8 style, through the monofilament. And not only that, but wrapping behind the thread as well, or wrapping behind the weed guard as well. And this will just make sure that the fly is nice and durable. You kind of want some thread behind the weed guard because you want to push that weed guard forward. It'll naturally want to sit towards the hook point. So by putting a little thread behind it, it'll push it forward somewhat and give it some tension, which you want that stiff mono to have some tension to prevent it from getting caught. Once we're satisfied here, we can wrap this down and throw some whip finishes on here. And we can start trimming the fly and working on the shape of it. Before we do that though, we are going to just make sure that the mono is sitting where we like it, and then we'll go ahead and trim it. So you can see here, I'm just going to cut this to where it's just protruding slightly past the hook point. Tarpon hooks curve somewhat upwards with the hook point, so you don't really need to have it go too far down, but the idea is you want it to protrude past the hook point. The mono will have some give to it as it hits a tree branch or something underwater, so, or mangrove root, let's say. So you do want it to have a little wiggle room before it'll actually cause the hook point to get stuck on something. And now what we can do is we can start trimming the fly. So all I do is I usually start on the sides and just weed out some of the material or thin it out by just taking my scissors. It's important with trimming flies like this is angle your scissors away from the fly. You can see it easier when I trim the top or bottom. By angling your scissors away, you're not going to accidentally cut too much of the material. And just go slowly and just kind of thin it out. Don't worry about it too much. It's better to not trim too much off because you can't add it, right? So just go slowly and keep your scissors pointed outwards and just keep picturing the shape and profile that you're trying to work towards. Now once I have the basic profile and the shape of the fly trimmed out, what I'll do is I'll take my 3D eyes, and these are some 3D eyes I got from saltwaterflies.com, whatever size you like, and some E6000 or Loctite liquid seal. And by applying this glue, a pretty healthy amount, not too much to where it's going to spread out too much, but a pretty healthy amount to the back side of the eye, and then taking the eye and pushing it down and then pushing it back, we can spread that glue evenly behind the eye and then have it penetrate deep into the synthetic material. And that's important. That glue is going to give us a really nice durable finish. With adhesives like E6000 or Loctite liquid seal, they work really well with synthetics in particular. I don't know why, it just the makeup of the glue works well with synthetic materials like this. So you really want that eye to be set in there and not fall off too easily. And you can see here I forgot to trim this one side, so I'm just going to thin it out a little bit like we did at the initial start of our trimming. Gluing the eyes on the fly, you will notice that the material kind of gets compressed somewhat at the head, so the shape of the fly will change somewhat. So now we can go ahead and give it the kind of final trim before we apply liquid fusion on top of the 3D eyes. So we just want to make sure that the fly is kind of right where we want it before we go ahead and finish it off here. Again, just touching up any of those rogue fibers that are sticking up and just envisioning the shape and profile. I'm kind of going for more of like a pilchard, some sort of just generic medium body baitfish, almost like peanut bunker shape. But I'm sure there's all sorts of different baitfish and reef fish and sardines and stuff like that down there that potentially you could find, whether offshore or inshore. So that's kind of what I was going for here. Now we can go ahead and take some liquid fusion. Now I've had people ask me about using UV resin. The reason why I like liquid fusion is it dries super thin and it also doesn't add any weight. So it's very easy to work with. And by just taking liquid fusion and applying it to the outside of the eye here, and particularly you want to make sure that the liquid fusion actually touches the synthetic material. It's important to not get it all over the fibers because the fibers will stiffen up and become hard, but being certain to coat the eye completely so that not only the E6000 is working from underneath, but you have the liquid fusion securing it from above. We found this greatly increases the durability of the flies. This is something that we started doing after tying Johnny Kane's Kinky Mothers, which I have a video covering here on this channel. And you can see here the finished fly. This is a fantastic fly. You can tie it in mullet styles, you can tie it in peanut bunker styles, you can tie it in mackerel styles. There's just so many different options when it comes to tying these flies. It's a classic baitfish fly in my opinion. And after letting the liquid fusion dry for probably about, ideally you want 24 hours before you fish it in my opinion. You can let it dry for about 4 or 5 hours, which I did here, and then put it in the tank. See here, the EP fiber has fantastic movement to it, even though it's synthetic material. It's a very soft and subtle synthetic material compared to something like Steve Farrar fiber. But they both have their pros and cons, or they both have their places and applications in saltwater fly tying. just by changing the amount of the material, the length of the material, the hook, the shape of the fly, and just using this one material essentially, you can imitate quite a lot of different bait fish with this pattern. So just for that regard, it's something that you should know, and it's a fly worth having in your fly box. Well, there we go. That's the EP Baitfish. There's many different variations of the fly. The classic EP Minnow and the EP Mullets. There's so many different stuff, and quite a versatile fly, and it's a lot of fun to tie. So I thought it was a great fly to feature here on this channel. Well, hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Mike from LI Flies Mike. We have new fly tying videos and fly fishing videos coming out every week. We have live fly tying streams every Friday night, as well as early access for members. Well, thank you so much to everybody who's been watching, supporting here on the channel. We're getting close to 5,000 subs, by the way, so I can't thank you enough. And it's been awesome, and I can't wait to make a bunch more videos, and we'll see where 2026 takes us. Well, thank you so much for watching, and as always, tight lines.